A 7-year-old girl is lying awake in a house with a baby monitor pointed at her bed. She is not a baby. She is being watched by the only parent she has left, and that parent is the man who just killed her mother on the side of a cliff. This is not a story about a stranger. It's a story about a father who spent 20 years perfecting the art of being trusted, and a little girl who had no idea she was living with a killer until the FBI showed up at her school. Stay with me, because by the end of this video you'll understand how a family's love for a little girl became the only thing standing between her and a $1 million payday for her own father. It's late September 2012, and on the surface, the Henthorne household looks like something out of a magazine. Harold Henthorne is the kind of father other parents talk about. He makes his daughter's breakfast, drives her to school, tucks her in at night, and has installed cameras around the house that he says are there to keep her safe. His wife, Toni, is an accomplished eye doctor, warm and well-liked, the kind of person who lights up a room. Their daughter is 7 years old and adores her father completely. To her, he can do no wrong. What she does not know, what almost no one around her knows, is that her father has a history that does not match the image he's built. That weekend, Harold and Toni leave their daughter with a babysitter and head to Rocky Mountain National Park to celebrate their 12th wedding anniversary. It's supposed to be a quiet, romantic getaway, just the two of them, away from the noise of daily life, hiking somewhere beautiful. Toni's older brother, Barry, a cardiologist living hundreds of miles away in Mississippi, has no reason to think anything is wrong. His sister is exactly where she's supposed to be, doing exactly what a happy couple does on their anniversary. Then his phone rings. It's Harold, and he's not making sense. His voice is frantic. He keeps repeating that he can't talk, that Barry needs to check his phone, and before Barry can ask a single question, the line goes dead. When Barry looks down, there's a text waiting for him. Toni has been hurt. A fall from a rock. A critical accident. That's all he's told. Over the next several minutes, more messages arrive, vital signs, a pulse, a breathing rate, and Barry, using every ounce of his medical training, tries to read between the lines of what his brother-in-law is telling him from 1,500 miles away. Then, the messages change. Harold says Toni has stopped breathing. He needs to start CPR. And Barry, sitting helpless in his own living room, understands that this is no longer a minor injury. His sister is dying, and there is nothing he can do about it except wait for a text. Hours pass. Barry has already alerted the rest of the family, Toni's parents, her other relatives, everyone bracing for news no one wants to hear. Then it comes. Harold texts one word that changes everything. She's gone. Toni Henthorne, a devoted mother, respected physician, and the center of her family's world, is dead at the bottom of a remote trail in the Colorado mountains. Her 7-year-old daughter has just lost her mother, and she doesn't even know it yet. What almost nobody in that family realizes in the first raw hours of grief is that they are not looking at a tragic accident. They are looking at the aftermath of a murder that has been planned for months, and possibly the second wife this same man has lost under circumstances that were never properly investigated. The official story, at first, seems plausible enough. Harold and Toni had gone off the main trail to avoid crowds, ending up in a remote, rugged part of the park most hikers never see. Somewhere along a raised outcrop, Toni fell nearly 140 feet to her death. Harold called 911, was coached through CPR by a dispatcher, and told rescuers he'd had to hang up because his phone battery was dying. Search and rescue reached a couple hours later, but by then it was too late. To a grieving family, it read like an unthinkable accident, the kind of freak tragedy that ends a marriage and a life without warning. But almost immediately, something feels wrong to the people who loved Toni most. Within 24 hours of her death, a full memorial page is already published, professionally written, complete with photos and a life story, all put together by Harold himself. He personally plans every detail of the funeral, the music, the singers, the video tribute. To Barry, the speed and precision of it all doesn't look like grief. It looks like project management. And then there's the memorial service itself. Hundreds of people show up to mourn Toni, and in the middle of all that sorrow, Harold is seen laughing with friends, shaking hands, talking about golf, acting less like a widower and more like a man hosting a party. Meanwhile, his 7-year-old daughter sits nearby, barely speaking, showing almost no emotion at all, as if she's too afraid to feel anything in front of him. Barry can't shake the feeling that something underneath this story doesn't add up. He starts quietly comparing notes with the rest of the family, and he's not the only one who's noticed the strangeness. Slowly, carefully, they begin taking notes, watching, and pushing investigators to take a second look at what really happened on that mountain. Because buried in the Henthorne family history is something that changes the entire picture. 17 years earlier, long before he ever met Tony, Harold was married to a woman named Lynn. In 1995, while the couple was on a remote Colorado road, Lynn died in what Harold described as an accident involving their car. Investigators at the time closed the case within days, ruling it a tragic mishap with no foul play. Harold was the only witness. There was no real investigation, no real scrutiny, just a grieving husband and an unlucky accident, or so it seemed. What almost nobody looked closely at back then was where the money went afterward. A life insurance payout of hundreds of thousands of dollars paid directly to Harold. For years after that, Harold meets Tony through a Christian dating website, presenting himself as a successful, self-made businessman. It's an image that will later completely fall apart. When investigators eventually dig into his financial history, they find something staggering. No steady employment, no verifiable business, no income on record for over 2 decades. The wealthy entrepreneur persona was fiction. The only real money that had ever come in was the insurance payout after his first wife's death. Now, in 2012, Harold stands to collect on Tony's death too. This time, insurance policies worth well over $4 million. And in a detail that turns the family's blood cold, they learn Harold has also taken out a life insurance policy on his own daughter, worth around $1 million. A 7-year-old girl, now living alone with the only person who benefits financially if something happens to her. For Tony's family, the picture crystallizes into something horrifying. 2 wives, 2 remote locations, 2 deaths, with Harold as the only witness both times. And now a little girl living under his roof with a price tag attached to her life. But knowing something and proving it are 2 very different problems. There's no confrontation, no confession, no smoking gun, just a pattern of coincidences too consistent to ignore. And a clock that feels like it's ticking every single day Haley remains in that house. While the family pushes quietly behind the scenes, life with Harold grows more controlling by the month. He limits contact with Tony's relatives, making visits harder and harder to arrange. On the surface, he still plays the role of the devoted, protective single father. But behind closed doors, his daughter needs permission for almost everything. When she eats, when she plays, even when she drinks water. He installs a baby monitor in her room despite the fact that she is well past infancy, watching her constantly. It isn't protection. It's control, dressed up as love. Investigators, working with the family, begin quietly building a case. And when they go back and scrutinize the night of Tony's death with fresh eyes, the inconsistencies start piling up fast. Harold told dispatchers he had to end the 911 call because his phone battery was too low. Yet phone records later show he went on to make more than 20 additional calls and exchanged nearly 100 text messages that same night. Barry, reflecting on the vital signs Harold had texted him in real time, starts to realize as a cardiologist that the numbers don't add up with the injuries Harold described. If Tony had been bleeding out the way he claimed, her heart rate should have told a very different story than the one in those messages. Then there's the camera. Tony was supposedly holding it when she fell, yet the memory card survives the fall intact, filled with photos from the hike the couple had taken together that day. Investigators use those images to retrace their steps, following the couple off the main trail into a remote, rarely visited section of the park. One photograph in particular stands out. Harold, standing near the exact edge of the cliff, holding onto a tree for balance. Investigators studying the terrain conclude that the ledge itself isn't the kind of place someone simply stumbles off. To fall from it, you'd have to physically step out and away from safety. It isn't a place you slip. It's a place you'd have to be pushed. The most damning discovery comes from Harold's own car. Tucked away inside is a detailed park map with the couple's hiking route traced out, and an X marked in a specific spot. The exact spot where Tony died. With that piece of evidence, investigators are no longer looking at a grieving husband. They're looking at a man who planned this. The FBI moves in, quietly surveilling Harold for days, deliberately waiting until his daughter is safely at school before making an arrest. Because the last thing anyone wants is a hostage situation with a 9-year-old girl in the house. On the morning of November 6, 2014, Harold drops his daughter off at school like it's any other day. He never makes it home. Federal agents take him into custody, and over 2 years after Tony's death, Harold Henthorne is formally charged with first-degree murder. For his daughter, the news arrives in the worst possible way, called down to the principal's office and told, without warning, that her father has been arrested for killing her mother. At 9 years old, she loses the only parent she has left all over again in an instant. She's placed temporarily in the care of a family friend while the case makes its way through the courts, trying to process a truth that feels impossible to accept, that the man who tucked her in every night is the same man who ended her mother's life. In September 2015, nearly 3 years after Tony's death, Harold's trial finally begins, drawing national attention. Prosecutors lay out the pattern for the jury. 2 wives, 2 deaths, 2 remote locations. 1 man standing to profit both times. Lynn's family travels to support Tony's, adding their own account of a death that was never fully investigated the first time around. After hearing everything, the jury doesn't buy Harold's story. He's convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. With Harold behind bars for good, the final chapter of this story becomes about healing. Just before Christmas that same year, Barry and his wife are granted full guardianship of their niece, giving her a permanent, loving home with people who fought for years to protect her. It becomes, in every sense, the best Christmas gift the family could imagine.
In the years since, Tony's daughter has spoken publicly about what she went through, choosing to build a life defined by her own strength rather than her father's crimes. She's talked about the process of forgiving him, not for his sake, but for her own, so she can be free of his control and fully her own person. Her mother's memory lives on through a scholarship fund created in her name, helping aspiring medical students continue the kind of work Tony dedicated her life to. What began as one of the most calculated betrayals imaginable, a father willing to profit from the deaths of the people who trusted him most, ended with a little girl choosing, every day, to become someone entirely outside of his control. If this case shook you the way it shook me, let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more real stories of survival against the odds.